The judgment of silence, the crystal spires of Celestine Station pierced the void like frozen lightning, their surfaces reflecting the light of 1,000 distant stars. Within these magnificent halls, the Stellar Confederation had ruled the galaxy for over 3 millennia, maintaining what they called the Great Peace through careful control and unwavering tradition. Representatives from 47 species gathered here monthly, their voices echoing through chambers carved from pure diamond, their decisions shaping the fate of trillions. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood at the observation deck, watching cargo. Ships drift between the stations, massive arms like fireflies in a crystal web. 3 years had passed since humanity first stepped through these halls as the newest members of the Confederation. 3 years of hope, of believing they had found their place among the stars. She adjusted her blue dress uniform, the golden earth insignia catching the light. Today's session would discuss the Outer Rim development projects, something humanity had eagerly volunteered to lead. The summons came without warning. A messenger drone, sleek and silver, materialized beside her with a soft chime. The holographic message was brief and formal. Representative Vasquez, your immediate presence is required in the Grand Assembly. Matter of highest priority. Elena's stomach tightened. Highest priority sessions were rare, reserved for galactic crises or major policy changes. She had received no briefing, no advance warning. Her footsteps echoed through the marble corridors as she made her way to the assembly hall. The Grand Assembly was a marvel of engineering and artistry. The chamber stretched nearly 1 kilometer in diameter, with tiered seating rising in concentric circles toward a domed ceiling that displayed real-time images of space. At the center stood the speaker's podium, surrounded by the inner circle where the 5 founding species held permanent seats. Elena took her designated place in the newer members section, noting the unusual tension in the air. Conversations were hushed, and many representatives avoided eye contact. High Arbiter Zolmik of the Vorthok rose from the inner circle, his 6-meter frame casting a shadow across the podium. The Vorthok had been among the Confederation's founders, their species prizing order and tradition above all else. Zolmik's crystalline exoskeleton gleamed purple-black under the chamber lights, and his 4 eyes fixed on Elena with unmistakable hostility. This emergency session has been called to address a growing threat to the stability and harmony of our Confederation, he began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Around her, other representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The human delegation was small, only 12 members representing Earth's colonies and interests. Dr. Marcus Chen, her chief science advisor, leaned forward in his seat, his dark eyes alert and calculating. Captain Sarah Mitchell, their military liaison, kept her hand near her communicator. They all sensed something was wrong. For 3 years, we have welcomed humanity into our ranks with open arms, Zolmik continued, his tone growing colder. We extended the hand of friendship, shared our knowledge, and invited Earth to participate in our ancient traditions. Yet, what have we received in return? Disruption, chaos, a species that refuses to acknowledge the wisdom of established order. The accusations came like hammer blows. Humanity had exceeded development quotas without authorization. They had shared technology with species still in probationary status. They had questioned trade restrictions that had maintained peace for centuries. They had proposed reforms to systems that had worked perfectly for millennia. With each charge, Elena felt her hope crumbling. These weren't crimes, They were the natural result of human innovation and curiosity. The humans possess a dangerous tendency toward what they call thinking outside the box, continued Ambassador Trellick of the Saurian Dominion, rising from her seat. They refuse to accept that some boundaries exist for good reason. They're reckless. Experiments with quantum mechanics nearly destabilized 3 star systems last year. Alina stood to respond, but Zomic raised a clawed hand for silence. The evidence is clear. Humanity's presence disrupts the careful balance we have maintained. Their aggressive expansion, their disregard for protocol, their constant questioning of authority, all point to one conclusion. They are incompatible with civilized society. The chamber erupted in murmurs and whispered conversations. Elena's heart pounded as she realized where this was heading. "High Arbiter, if I may address these concerns," she called out, her voice carrying across the vast space. "Humanity has always acted within the bounds of Confederation law. Our innovations have benefited everyone. The quantum research you mention prevented a stellar collapse that would have destroyed the Kepler colonies. Prevented a collapse you caused with your reckless experimentation," snapped Councillor Vexter of the Ethereal Collective. "This is precisely the kind of dangerous thinking that threatens us all." Zolmec's 4 eyes gleamed with cold satisfaction. "The inner circle has reached a unanimous decision. By the authority vested in us by the founding charter, we hereby expel humanity from the Stellar Confederation. Effective immediately, all trade agreements are void. All technological exchanges are terminated, and all human vessels are banned. From Confederation space, Earth and its colonies will have 72 hours to evacuate Confederation territory." The words hit Alina like a physical blow. Around her, the human delegation sat in stunned silence. Expulsion was a death sentence. Earth's colonies depended on Confederation trade routes for everything from medical supplies to food. Their fastest ships would take weeks to reach the outer colonies, far longer than the 72-hour deadline. "You can't be serious," Alina said, standing despite the shocked murmurs filling the chamber. "Our colonies have over 50 million civilians. Children, elderly, medical patients who can't be moved. This isn't justice, it's genocide." "The decision is final," Zolmic replied with no trace of emotion. "Humanity has proven itself unfit for civilized society. Perhaps isolation will teach you the value of order and restraint." Alina looked around the chamber, searching for any sign of support, any species willing to speak for humanity. She found only averted gazes and uncomfortable silence. Even the species they had helped, the ones who had benefited from human innovation and generosity, remained seated. Fear ruled here. Fear of crossing the inner circle. Fear of suffering the same fate as humanity. The session ended with brutal efficiency. Security escorts appeared as if from thin air, politely but firmly guiding the human delegation toward the exit. Elena's last view of the Grand Assembly was Zolmic's satisfied expression as he watched them leave. The crystal spires of Celestine Station, once a symbol of hope and unity, now looked like a beautiful prison from which humanity had just been cast out. The journey back to Earth felt endless. Their ship, the Use Harmony, had been stripped of its Confederation, transponders, and escorts. They traveled alone through space that had suddenly become hostile territory. Captain Mitchell worked frantically with her communications team, trying to reach the colonies before the deadline expired. Dr. Chen ran calculations on his portable computer, his face growing paler with each result. "The numbers don't work," he said quietly to Alina as she stood at the observation deck, watching Earth grow larger through the reinforced windows. We can't evacuate everyone in time. The outer colonies, Kepler-7, New Geneva, the mining stations in the asteroid belt, they're too far away. Even if we commandeer every civilian transport, every cargo hauler, we'll leave millions behind. Alina pressed her hand against the cool metal of the bulkhead. 50 million souls scattered across dozens of worlds, all depending on her to find a solution. Then we don't evacuate them, she said finally. We make our stand. The message went out. On all frequencies, broadcast to every human settlement, every ship, every listening post. This is Admiral Alina Vasquez, speaking for the government of Earth and all human colonies. The Stellar Confederation has expelled us from their territory, giving us 72 hours to abandon settlements that took decades to build. They expect us to run, to scatter like frightened animals into the dark between stars. I say we give them a different answer. Her voice carried 2 mining platforms in asteroid fields, 2 research stations orbiting gas giants, 2 farming colonies on distant moons. We are human beings. We crossed impossible distances to reach the stars. We built cities on worlds of ice and metal. We turned barren rocks into gardens and hostile atmospheres into homes. We will not be driven from what we have built by the fear and jealousy of others. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Colony governors, ship captains, station commanders all sent the same message. They would stay, they would fight if they had to, but they would not abandon their homes because alien politicians deemed them inconvenient. When the Confederation fleet arrived at Kepler-7, they found the colony's defenses powered up and ready. Mining ships had been converted into crude but effective weapons platforms. Civilian transports carried makeshift armor and improvised weapons. Governor Patricia Martinez stood on the command deck of the colony's central habitat, her message simple and clear. This is our home. You want it, you'll have to take it. The siege lasted 6 days. Confederation warships, sleek and advanced, circled the human settlements like predators. But they hesitated to fire the first shot. Destroying civilian populations would shatter their carefully maintained image as benevolent protectors of galactic peace. Instead, they implemented a blockade, cutting off supply lines and communications. Waiting for hunger and desperation to do their work, it almost worked. On colonies like New Geneva and Titan Station, food ran low, medical supplies dwindled, and life support systems strained under the pressure. Children cried from hunger while their parents made impossible choices about rationing. The Confederation counted on human compassion, on their unwillingness to watch their own suffer. They underestimated human ingenuity. Dr. Chen had spent those 6 days working with teams of scientists across the colonies, sharing data and resources through quantum channels the Confederation couldn't block. Emergency food synthesis from local materials, makeshift medical equipment built from mining tools, life support systems jury-rigged from salvaged parts. Slowly, impossibly, the colonies began to stabilize. On the 7th day, something changed. A message arrived from the Nexari territories, transmitted on an old emergency frequency. Human friends, this is Ambassador Kethfa of the Nexari Resistance. We have been watching your struggle with great interest. Perhaps it is time we discussed mutual cooperation. Alina read the message 3 times before its implications sank in. The Nexari had been conquered by the Confederation 50 years ago. Their homeworlds turned into resource extraction sites while their people were relocated to protective reservations. If they were reaching out to humanity now, It meant the Confederation had more enemies than just Earth. The meeting took place in secret. In the asteroid field between Mars and Jupiter, Ambassador Kethva arrived in a ship that barely qualified. As spaceworthy, its hull patched with salvaged metal and held together by hope and determination. But the being who stepped aboard the Harmony carried himself with unmistakable dignity. The Nexari were tall and graceful, with luminescent blue skin and eyes that held depths of intelligence and pain. Your expulsion has caused quite a stir in certain circles, Kethva explained as they sat in the ship's small conference room. There are many species within the Confederation who remember what freedom felt like. The Vorthok and their allies rule through fear, but fear is a weapon that cuts both ways. Alina leaned forward, hope stirring in her chest for the first time in weeks. What are you proposing? Kethva's smile was predatory. Revolution, Admiral. The kind that starts small and grows into wildfire. The Confederation cast you out because they feared your influence, your refusal to accept limitations. They were right to be afraid. The banner of Liberation 6. Months after the expulsion, humanity had transformed from refugees into ghosts haunting the galaxy's edge. Their colonies, cut off from Confederation trade, had become laboratories of innovation born from desperation. On New Geneva, vertical farms now produced more food than the planet had ever imported. Titan Station had converted its mining equipment into the most advanced fabrication facility outside Confederation space. Every human settlement had become a fortress of necessity and innovation. Dr. Marcus Chen stood in the heart of Lunar Base's new research facility, watching his team work with equipment that would have been impossible under Confederation regulations. The quantum resonance engines they had developed didn't just break the Confederation's technology restrictions, they shattered them completely. The test flight was successful beyond all projections, he reported to Admiral Vasquez through the encrypted comlink. We can reach the outer colonies in days instead of weeks. More importantly, we can do it without using the Confederation's hyperspace beacons. Alina studied the data from her command center on Earth's rebuilt orbital station. Independence 1 was humanity's first completely autonomous space facility, constructed entirely from resources within the Sol system. Its weapons systems were crude by Confederation standards, but they were human-built and human-controlled. No one could shut them down with administrative commands or override codes. How many ships can we retrofit with the new engines? She asked. 43. Vessels are already complete, Chen replied. Another 120 are in various stages of conversion. But Alina, we need to talk about the weapons systems. What we're building isn't just defensive. If the Confederation discovers what we're capable of now, Alina nodded grimly. The past 6 months had changed humanity in ways the Confederation never intended. Cut off from alien technology and support, humans had been forced to rely on their most dangerous trait, the ability to find solutions where none should exist. The results were ships that moved faster than Confederation vessels, weapons that ignored conventional shielding, and manufacturing techniques that could turn asteroids into battleships. Ambassador Kethva's message arrived on the anniversary of humanity's expulsion. My friends, the network has grown beyond our wildest hopes. 17 species now stand ready to act when you give the signal. The Confederation's grip weakens with each passing day, but we need a catalyst, something, to show the galaxy that resistance is possible. The catalyst came from an unexpected source, Dr. Sarah Kim, working at the research station orbiting Jupiter. intercepted a series of Confederation communications detailing something called Operation Clean Slate. The documents were encrypted, but human cryptographers had become very good at breaking alien codes over the past year. Alina read the decrypted files with growing horror. The Confederation hadn't just expelled humanity, they had been systematically eliminating other problematic species. The Thorian philosophers, known for questioning authority, had suffered a mysterious plague that wiped out their colonies. The Deltari merchants, who had traded outside Confederation channels, had been accused of piracy and hunted to near extinction. The HFY scientists, whose research had challenged Confederation orthodoxy, had simply vanished from their home worlds. They're not just maintaining order, Alina said to her assembled staff. They're committing genocide. Anyone who thinks differently, anyone who questions their authority, gets marked for elimination. We weren't expelled, we were scheduled for extermination. Captain Mitchell, now bearing the rank of Fleet Admiral, studied the tactical implications. The good news is that their military is spread thin across multiple operations. They've been counting on fear and surprise to eliminate resistance before it can organize. The bad news is that once they finish with the current targets, they'll come for us with everything they have. Alina stood and walked to the viewing port, looking out at the blue marble that had given birth to humanity. Earth looked peaceful from orbit, but she knew that beneath those clouds, factories worked around the clock, producing the tools of war. Humanity had learned a harsh lesson about trusting others with their survival. Then we don't wait for them to come to us, she decided. It's time to take the fight to them. The first strike came at Proxima Station, a mid-level Confederation facility in what had once been human space. The attack force consisted of just 12 ships, but they moved with coordination and technology the Confederation had never seen. Human vessels flickered in and out of normal space like ghosts, appearing long enough to deliver devastating attacks before vanishing again. The station's defenses, designed to counter conventional Confederation tactics, were useless against ships that could ignore the laws of physics as the Confederation understood them. Within 3 hours, Proxima Station was under human control, its garrison either captured or evacuated. But Elena's forces didn't stop there. "Attention citizens of Proxima Station," her voice echoed through the facility's communication system. "This is Admiral Alina Vasquez of the Free Worlds Coalition. You are not our prisoners. You are not our enemies. You are beings who have been trapped by a system that values order over freedom, control over justice." The speech was broadcast not just through the station, but across the entire sector on frequencies the Confederation couldn't jam. For too long, the Stellar Confederation has maintained peace through fear. They have silenced dissent through elimination. They have maintained order through oppression. Today, that changes. Within hours, reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Nexari-resistant cells had emerged from hiding to seize government buildings on 3 worlds. Exiled survivors had sabotaged Confederation research facilities. Thorian refugees had organized strikes that shut down mining operations in 4 systems. The spark had been struck, and the wildfire was spreading. High Arbiter Zolmic's response was swift and brutal. Confederation fleets moved to crush the uprisings, but they found enemies everywhere. Supply convoys vanished without a trace. Communications networks went dark. Garrison commanders found their own soldiers questioning orders, their own citizens refusing to cooperate. Asterisk. The second phase of the liberation campaign began 3 weeks later. Elena's forces, now numbering over 200 ships, struck at the heart of the Confederation's power structure. Instead of military targets, They hit the economic foundations. That kept the empire running. Trade routes were interdicted. Banking networks were hacked. Resource extraction facilities were liberated, and their workers given a choice: freedom or continued servitude. Most chose freedom. Ambassador joined Alina aboard the flagship Use Liberation as they prepared for the final assault on Celestine Station. The Nexari had brought intelligence that changed everything. The Confederation's founding species weren't united in their oppression. Internal divisions had been growing for centuries, held in check only by the threat of external enemies. The Ethereal Collective has been questioning the expulsion policy for months, Kethfer explained. The Saurian Dominion lost significant trade revenue when humanity was cast out. Even some Vorthok voices have begun calling for negotiation rather than elimination. Alina studied the tactical displays showing Confederation fleet positions around their capital station. They're divided, but they're still dangerous. Celestine Station has enough firepower to destroy entire fleets. Yes, Kethver agreed. But they also have something else: fear. Fear of what humanity has become. Fear of the coalition we've built. Fear that their own people will demand the same freedoms we're offering to others. The final battle began not with weapons, but with words. Elena's message to Celestine Station was broadcast on every frequency, in every language spoken within Confederation space. Citizens of the galaxy, this is Admiral Elena Vasquez, speaking for the Free Worlds Coalition. For 3 millennia, you have been told that order requires oppression, that peace demands the silence of dissent. You have been told that questioning authority leads to chaos, that freedom means destruction. Around Celestine Station, nearly 1,000 ships from a dozen species hung in space, not attacking, not threatening, simply present. A visible demonstration that the Confederation no longer spoke for the galaxy. We offer you a different path, Alina continued. A coalition of equals, where every voice matters and every species has the right to determine its own destiny. Where innovation is celebrated, not feared. Where diversity strengthens us instead of dividing us. The response came from an unexpected source. Captain Vorthik, commander of the Confederation's 3rd Fleet and nephew to High Arbiter Zolmik, himself broadcast a message of his own. Admiral Vasquez speaks truth. I have seen what fear and oppression have done to our galaxy. I have watched good beings destroyed for the crime of thinking differently. It ends today. One by one, Confederation ships began powering down their weapons. Not all of them, but enough to matter. Ground forces on occupied worlds laid down their arms. Colonial governors opened negotiations with resistance leaders. The empire that had ruled through fear discovered that fear was a fragile foundation. High Arbiter Zomik made his final stand in the Grand Assembly, the same chamber where humanity had been condemned a year earlier. But now the seats were filled with representatives of the Free Worlds Coalition, beings who had thrown off the chains of oppression and claimed their right to self-determination. You have destroyed everything we built. Zolmik accused Alina as she stood at the speaker's podium where he had once pronounced humanity's sentence. Millennia of peace, centuries of stability, all reduced to chaos by your arrogance. Alina looked at the being who had cast her people into darkness, then at the diverse assembly of free worlds surrounding them. We didn't destroy your peace, High Arbiter. We revealed it for what it really was, the peace of the grave, the stability of chains. You maintained order by eliminating anyone who dared to dream of something better. The vote was unanimous. the Stellar Confederation was dissolved, its authoritarian structure replaced by the Free Worlds Coalition. Not a government, but a voluntary association of independent species working together for mutual benefit. The founding charter was simple. Every world had the right to determine its own path. Every being had the right to speak their mind, and every species had the right to reach for the stars. Alina stood once again at the observation deck, but now she watched ships from dozens of species moving freely through space that had once been forbidden to them. The crystal spires of what was now called Liberation Station gleamed in the light of distant stars, but their beauty no longer hid oppression. They had become a symbol of what beings could accomplish when they worked together as equals rather than rulers and subjects. Dr. Chen joined her at the viewing port, his face showing the exhaustion of a year spent rebuilding civilization from the ground up. "Any regrets?" he asked quietly. Alina considered the question. Humanity had paid a heavy price for their freedom. Thousands had died in the fighting. Millions more had suffered through the dark months of isolation and siege. But they had also accomplished something unprecedented. They had broken an empire not through conquest, but through liberation. "No regrets," she said finally. "We were cast out because they feared what we might become. They were right to be afraid." Below them, in the great assembly hall, representatives from 63 species worked together to draft trade agreements, scientific exchanges, and mutual defense pacts. The arguments were loud, the negotiations complex, and the process messy beyond belief. It was, Alina realized, the most beautiful chaos she had ever witnessed. Humanity had been cast into darkness by those who feared the light they carried. Now that light illuminated the galaxy, and the stars themselves marched under the banner of freedom. Asterisk.